Hey guys, just to preface this little conversation, this was a little podcast thing that I did with Emily from Micro Four Third Nerds. We talked all about her past, how she got into system, how she got into YouTube, a couple things she hopes for the future of Lumix, and much, much more. If you have any podcast names or ideas, definitely write that down in the description below because I have not a clue. Anyways, let's just dive right into that conversation. So today, guys, we are going to be joined with none other than Micro Four Third Nerds, Emily. She's going to tell us a little bit about who she is, where she's from, what she does, and just everything a little bit in between. Later on in this conversation, we will touch point on talking about the G9 Mark II, especially being one of the best travel cameras for Micro Four Third cameras. So anyways, Emily, hello.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Emily, we met each other at the Lumix Collective, but I've been a big fan of your channel ever since I got into the Micro Four Third cameras. So can you just give me and then give my audience just a little bit of context on who you are, what do you do? Is YouTube your full time? Do you do other filmmaking projects? Just kind of the whole rundown of who Emily is.
Yeah, sure. So I run the YouTube channel Micro Four Nerds. I've been shooting Micro Four Thirds cameras for a very long time. I used to be a full-time wedding photographer and corporate videographer, and about 12 months ago, I've made the jump to being full-time YouTube. So I'm a hashtag content creator for my sins.
Hashtag content creator. I love that. Yeah, well, that's so exciting. That I'm so stoked for you that you finally made that jump to being full-time YouTube. I feel like that's such a huge accomplishment. And what brought you to the Lumix camera system? What was the original introduction? What was that first camera that brought you into the system? Was Lumix your first camera system, or did you own something else? Because I know the first video on your channel, at least publicly, is a Micro Four Third video, but I don't know if there's hidden videos behind that.
Yeah, so I was a Sony shooter for as long as I could remember. My very first sort of semi-proper camera was like a Sony bridge camera, and then the SLTs as they used to be back in the day, and then finally the A7, the first mirrorless that they brought out. And I just found the whole thing not very user-friendly. It was very much of a first generation, and I ended up selling that for an Olympus Pen F, which I thought was like the prettiest camera I've ever seen. But the menus drove me up the wall and it was really expensive. And on a whim, because it took the same lenses, I found a Lumix G7 for like £200, and I thought, what could possibly go wrong? And it was literally, it blew the Pen F out of the water. I ended up using this £200 Lumix camera 10 times more than this Pen F that I'd spent over £1,000 on. And the menu systems, the video features, everything was just wonderful. And that was my first sort of leap into the Lumix ecosystem. And then it was, I got a GH3, got a GH5, and the rest is history.
I feel like the G7 was that one camera that like so many Lumix creators came to from Lumix. I would love if Lumix made a G7 Mark II with like phase detect or like a couple upgraded features, but whole different topic.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
So when you got into the Olympus system and then the Lumix system, that was the introduction to Micro Four Third cameras for you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What was the main reasoning that you stuck with Micro Four Third cameras for so long? I mean, now I know you're shooting on the S5 II and 2X, but I know you still have a huge heart and still shoot a ton on the G9 Mark II and the GH6 as well.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by tiny cameras, and I've always wanted a camera that could just be taken with me everywhere. I bought the Pentax Q system way back in 2012 and just thought it was the cutest tiny little camera. And Micro Four Thirds was that perfect sweet spot where it is smaller, the lenses are smaller, but you can actually get amazing results out of it. And yeah, I've always just been fascinated by smaller cameras and smaller lenses, and that's why I've stuck with it.
I feel like the Micro Four Third cameras, especially in the lenses and the weight, is something that's definitely underrated so much. I know for myself personally, and maybe you can tell us some times where you've appreciated this, especially coming from the wedding filmmaking world, where I shot on a Micro Four Third camera and that lens being extremely tiny was so big of an advantage. Do you have like any moments where You were just like there and you're just grateful. You're like, my arms are not dead right now.
Oh
But
yeah,
then shooting
yeah.
now on my full frame, I'm using a 24 to 70 and my arms are killing me for how much that weighs.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite lenses for wedding films is the Lumix Leica 25mm 1.4, which is really small. And I think the benefit of that sort of setup with like a GH5 or a GH6 or whatever I'm shooting at the moment is people relax around you. People don't see a big, scary looking camera rig. They see a very incognito setup, and I think you can get more genuine reactions when people let the guard down around you and just forget that you're there.
For corporate projects, did you ever rig up your camera though? To like make it look more professional, make it feel a little bit heavy duty? What was your
Yeah,
kind of like
definitely.
go-to setup for using a corporate?
So I'd use a GH6 with a monitor, and I really like the 25 to 50 1.7 and the other one that's in that system, the 10 to 25, I think it is. The other massive ones, really, really cool lenses. And then I'd have sort of an external monitor, and I'd have my gimbal, and I'd look completely over the top. And it was totally unnecessary, but it did look the part.
Nice. And you own a ton of lenses. I remember watching one of your videos and you're like, all the lenses I use and most of that I don't even all the lenses I own and most I don't use. And having like what's your lens count for Micro Four Third cameras right now?
Well, I know my camera count is 39. It was 38, but I bought the Leica.
Your camera
Lenses, I
count
don't
is
know.
39?
Yeah,
Holy shoot. You just have
yeah,
a
it's not
wall
great.
of all your cameras? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah, I've
Wow,
got four
you were
cabinets of lenses. I think in terms of like pro lenses, I'm very picky. But then when it comes to like lenses for my own enjoyment, I really like vintage lenses. I like cheaper brands like TT Artisan or Maker. And I like that with the Micro Four Thirds system in particular, you can buy a load of cool stuff and it's relatively affordable. So yeah, I definitely have too many lenses.
right. I feel like that's like one of the hugest advantages for Micro Four Third cameras is that affordability, and it is nice finally to see, especially in that Lumix lineup, the affordability is still there with the full frame cameras as well. I feel like most other camera brands, their affordability just kind of goes through the roof, and it's just not affordable at all when the lens prices are like starting out for their prime sets around $1,300. So something I'm grateful for sure. Would you still recommend a Micro Four Third camera right now in 2024? And why would that be?
So I do think there's the right tool for the right job. I think if you are looking for a really solid hybrid camera that does video excellently and photo excellently, the G9 Mark II is stunning. I think if you were shooting in low light a lot and in challenging situations a lot, maybe you could look elsewhere. But I do think that Micro Four Thirds still ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
And I feel like, especially, I know you just recently had a video on this, but when you were traveling to California to the Ojai Lumix Collective trip, you made a video talking about the Lumix being one of the best travel cameras. What are a couple of reasons that you kind of think that why Lumix is one of the best, the Lumix G9 Mark II specifically, is one of the best travel cameras to date right now?
So, first of all, I hate traveling with a gimbal. I tend to just take carry on, and sometimes it takes up half of your bag, and it's a little bit, you never know how it's going to go through security. So having the IBIS and the G9 Mark II, where if you want to do some gentle walking shots or walk with the camera, and it will track you and it will be stable, it's so so good. And I also think having it to be sort of weather sealed is super handy as well. Like in Ohio, we had a day where it rained unconventionally in California, and we were all just not phased because we were all shooting Lumix cameras, so it was absolutely fine. Yeah, I just think even though the camera body is slightly larger, I think it's got so many features, and you can save weight on smaller lenses and not having a gimbal.
I think that's so huge, especially the fact that like you said, like if you're gonna bring a full frame camera and you want gimbal-like footage, you're gonna need a gimbal. You're gonna have to have a lot bigger of lenses, and the entire system itself will be a lot more rigged out just to kind of compensate for that all that stuff. versus on that G9 Mark II, like you mentioned. It's just that fact that you can just have basically a gimbal cinematic camera little beast in a pretty reasonable sized body with so many tiny lenses. And it's like, I think it's really fascinating how you can fit, 3 lenses in the size of one like full frame lens. If you want a 24 to 70, you can have the 24 to 70, a 25 mil, a 30 mil, a 50 mil. You can have multiple lenses that fit in the same capacity of one full frame lens. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages for Micro Four Third cameras, especially in the travel niche. Now, I wanted to touch part on, where do you see kind of Lumix kind of going forward in the future? What are some things that you're hoping for? What are some things that you want them to release? What are some things that you think maybe they're not doing so great on, but you want them to be doing better on? I want to get a couple of your thoughts. So we could start off with that first question. It's like, what do you want to see from Lumix going forward?
So there's 2 theoretical imaginary dream cameras that I want them to bring out. One is a stripped down version of the G9 Mark II that's smaller, maybe a G7 Mark II, which we talked about just. I think having something that's more photocentric, smaller camera body with maybe fewer video features would do really well. And I think similarly, they should probably bring out a more entry-level S5, because I think once people start investing in the lenses, they can start upgrading the bodies as they go. And at the moment, the entry-level price for an S5 Mark II is pretty reasonable, but having one that's a little bit lower would get more people into the system, I think.
I think I know that the physical engineering itself doesn't work, at least currently right now, because of the chassis of the body and how the sensor from the sensor to the adapter on it. But I think one thing that could help Lumix a ton is making a Micro Four Third adapter to L mounts. So you can buy L mount lenses for your Micro Four Third cameras. And I think that's something that should just be able to be seamlessly worked in together. Have you noticed you wanting that, using some of your full frame lenses with your Micro Four Third cameras, but not being able to convert that?
Yeah, it is a bit of a pain in the backside because, with most other lenses like Canon lenses or even Sony E mount, the Leica M mount, you can adapt them very easily to Micro Four Thirds, and it's sort of annoying that the one that you really can't is also Lumix branded.
I know. It's like one of those things you're like, why? Why? So, and then kind of going on the flip side. So I definitely, I feel like that's a huge thing right now for Lumix, is they need to come out with a budget-friendly camera that's just more updated than what their current budget-friendly cameras are. But on the flip side, what is the spec'd out camera that you want to see from Lumix? What does that include? What are the features that you want to see in it? Geek out with me here, Emily, and just go all out. What does a Micro Four Thirds spec'd out full beast, and what does the full frame version look like that?
Well, I don't want much, but I just want the 4K 60 to not have a crop. I would be so happy.
That would be huge.
That would be so good. Otherwise, it really honestly ticks all of my boxes. I don't need any more than what they have, but like having the 4K APS-C crop sometimes is quite irritating. And I do value that on Micro Four Thirds, even though it's a smaller sensor, there is no crop, even if you go up to like 120p in 4K.
I feel like, at least for myself, that open gate 60 frames a second is like that number one thing. The moment I found out, like at least on the GH6, that's not actual open gate 60 frames a second, I was just like, oh, my heart just kind of crumbled in bits a little bit. I feel like that's the feature. That and like false color would be great. But is there any camera body, that style that you want to see, or you are a personal fan because you do photography a lot as well, to the current chassis of the body?
Yeah, I am a sucker for interesting coloured cameras. It might not be the most professional option, but have you seen the Nikon one, the ZFC, I think it is, and they've brought out like a mint green one, and it's like throwback metal chassis. It looks so nice. And I think a stripped down G9 Mark II, but smaller, more photocentric, and maybe a little bit older in retro styling. Oh, that would be amazing. Because Lumix have not had the
Now,
prettiest cameras ever, have they? They never have the prettiest
they
cameras.
yeah, I mean I'm glad that they did that black on black. It is a little bit hard to see what your dials are when you're in the dark and you're like, dude, I can't see this to save my life for me. But the black on black is really, really nice.
Yeah, I'm filming on it right now. It's very nice.
So talking about that, are you primarily shooting on Micro Four Third or full frame now?
So for my talking head stuff when I'm doing YouTube and when I'm out and about, I do still use the S5 Mark II or the X, whichever one I fancy picking up because they're both so beautiful. But for my own personal projects, I'm still shooting Micro Four Thirds. I'm going to Costa Rica in a couple of days for like 3 weeks, and I'm taking my G9 Mark II and a little compact camera. So no full frame in sight.
Wow. So you're still sticking hard to that Micro Four Third cameras. I love that. I love that you're staying true to that. That's like so Micro Four Third nerds, so true to you. I think that's great. I feel like the Micro Four Third cameras are so underrated for like what they're able to provide. And then also the full frame cameras that Lumix are coming out with are like a lot of people, even like people that aren't Lumix shooters, are saying that the S5 II and 2X is one of the best cameras from 2023. Like just being the specs, the features, the budget, like everything that's in it is like one of those cameras that like makes like perfect sense. Kind of want to like gonna pivot just a little bit away from cameras, camera techs. I know you're a huge YouTuber. What got you into YouTube to begin with? I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. Talk about what your passions are, what you love about YouTube, and just all of that. So how'd you even get started in YouTube?
I was very, very shy. This sounds very strange, but I was really, really shy. And I watched YouTube all growing up. It's like the best thing. All the OG YouTubers. And I just thought one day I'd love to do that. And when it sort of coincided when I started shooting Micro Four Thirds, I thought, well, that's an interesting topic to start a channel around. And I love a pun. And I just sort of thought I can just try it. And if I'm terrible on camera, I can just delete it. And then I did that quite a bit. And then eventually I got the confidence to start sharing everything.
What was the first video that you posted on your channel? What was that about? Was it the one that is posted right now, or was it before that video?
So it was a roast of the original Sony A7 because, oh man, the lenses were atrocious, the barrel distortion was atrocious, the battery life was atrocious. It was not a good start. I know they're amazing cameras now, but I do think if you got the very first one, it did feel like an unfinished product. And that was really the one that kicked me off the ledge and onto a different system.
That's the Sony camera?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's day one of your channel, you were just like already roasting Sony.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Like just, nope. This channel's just for this. That's great. When you started, was that about like 6 or 7 years ago, correct? 2017. And then from there you went on this like long journey of consistently posting content. When did it finally feel like you're like, I'm a YouTuber? This is what I'm doing. Obviously it's different from your full time now, obviously, but before that, like when did it hit you realize like this is what I want to do for like the rest of my life?
So the first sort of exciting moment like that was when I was brought to the GH6 launch a couple of years ago, and it was a really interesting timing because it was just, I believe, just after COVID, I guess, and I hadn't been posting very regularly, and I was on the verge of maybe giving up. Couldn't get back into the swing of it, and then Lumix sort of took a chance on me and invited me to an event in London for the launch, and I got to use the camera, and yeah, I just thought, wow, this is a sign for me to get back into it. I was on the verge of giving up, and I thought, if they think I'm good enough, maybe I am good enough. And then it's just been consistency since then.
I think it's been so cool seeing like how Lumix in the last like couple years has just been investing so much into their creators. Obviously not only with equipment, but like fundings and then these events and just like it's creating this new community of content creators that I feel like is something that's so special for this platform, and so special not only for us, but like I feel like the fans as well, seeing like the extra interactions from each other. Is there one thing that you're just like the most grateful that Lumix did for you, and like with your YouTube channel, with your journey?
Yeah, I just think being in the conversations with them always feels like such a privilege. Going to the creative events, going to Tokyo for the S5 Mark II launch, it was so nice to sort of be in the room and feel the excitement with all the other creators that were there. And I do like that they're keeping it relatively small as well. It's not like 100 different creators. It's like we can all know one another and do what we're doing now and discuss and help one another. And I think, yeah, I hope it inspires people to see Lumix as a brand that does support creatives, because they do, and it's awesome.
I know, it was so fun. I remember on the Lumix collective trip, Emily and I were probably talking for like a solid hour and a half, and like the dinner was ready like 2 hours ago. We were just geeking out about the cameras. We were talking with Sean. We were talking about like the future, talking about things that were like, Sean, put this in the camera. We need this. This is what we want. And it's super rad to have this like community that is being built like from Lumix and like with Lumix creators. And it's like this cool future going forward that like we're trying to be alongside with. I know you weren't able to make it to a call that the other day, but like we're going to be alongside with the Lumix engineers. We're going to be able to talk to the actual team and have potential impact on what's going to be coming out in the future cameras, which I think is such a special thing to have right now. Do you have any thoughts about like that type of the side of the Lumix community that we're in?
Yeah, I think they put a lot of trust in us, and I think they do value our opinion. It isn't like for show or anything like that. It's literally like they know that we use these cameras day in and day out, and if we have an issue or if we have an idea, it's so nice to be able to bring it to the table and be listened to.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is there any like one thing you're like, this like physical feature or this thing you want to see going into a future camera? I know we touched base on the no crop 60 or open gate 60, but is there anything like quirkiness that you want in the cameras?
I really like real-time LUT. And I know that's a feature that already exists, but I'd love to see how that could evolve. Maybe you could tweak your own LUTs in camera a little bit more than you already can. Maybe you could, if you're shooting photography, automatically shoot 3 or 4 different filters into different JPEGs like you can in the Fujifilm cameras. I think it's a really underrated feature that isn't just about video. And in fact, I use it 10 times more for photo. So I'm really glad that that's in there, and I'm excited to see how that evolves.
I think that would be such a cool way to involve like something when like we were hoping for looking, at least so I'm hoping for looking. It would be cool for the video to like be able to record real-time LUT into like either a proxy version or a lower quality version, and then have your vlog still be just untouched. So if you want 2 things for video, I know that's going to take a lot more storage, or having 2 SD cards, one recording the real-time LUT and one not recording the real-time LUT, or having an intensity thing to like lower the intensity bar on the real-time LUT as well. There's so many features. I think the future with the firmware updates for real-time LUT is going to be really cool for these cameras. Anything you want to touch base on? Because that was kind of like the gist of all of my questions. So if there's anything that you want to touch base on, you want to share, advice you want to share for people that are getting into Lumix cameras, people that are interested in YouTube, is there anything like that?
I just think if you are on the fence or thinking about different brands to go for, I know other brands have larger online presences and different things like that, but I do think Lumix are so underrated and such good value for money. And talking to the engineers, knowing how much effort goes into every single lens, every single feature, I do think they are brilliant. And regardless of whether it's Micro Four Thirds or full frame, you can't really go wrong with either system. You're going to get great results from both.
It's such a cool community, and it's like, personally speaking, I would rather have them take longer on a camera release and release an amazing camera versus release a camera that could have just had a firmware update for a different camera.
Yeah. Have you been keeping up with the new OM1? Have you the OM1 Mark II, the OM system OM1 Mark II? So I think that falls into that category where a lot of those upgrades should have been a firmware upgrade to the original OM1, and they've priced that as 500 quid more than the G9 Mark II. And I'm just like,
I know. It's like those things where it's like, it feels like for the community, you know, when a camera brand releases something and it's like, this was just a firmware update. There was no physical differences. Like, this could have just been easily a firmware update. It kind of makes like the person who bought the original camera feel like a little offended in a way. Like, why didn't you just put this in a firmware update and like support your people who are supporting your brand? Instead, it feels more like a cash grab. And I feel like that's one of the greatest things with Lumix is those firmware updates. I remember the G9 originally not having like 4K 10-bit, and then it suddenly got it, and you're like, whoa, this just became like basically a new camera, and yet it still was a camera that you bought that didn't originally have it.
Oh yeah, it's so good. Like I buy a lot of tiny cameras that are older, and whenever I first get one, just as a bit of best practice, I'll check on the Lumix website when the latest firmware is, and I could be looking at like a 10-year-old camera and they could have updated it in like 2019. It's like they update things for years and years and years and years, and they are really loyal to the customer base.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining me for this conversation. If anyone wants to check out Emily and the Micro Four Third channel, definitely check it out. It's all things Lumix related and a ton of other cool filmmaking gear and filmmaking tips as well on her channel. So thank you so much, Emily, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much for watching this conversation that I had with Emily from Micro Four Third Nerds. If you did make it to the end of the video, right, we love Micro Four Third Nerds in the comments below. Just showing some love for Emily and joining us on this channel. Anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.